This, of course, is the Sega Master System. If, like me, you grew up in North America, there's a good chance you never played on one before. They weren't popular here, so they must not have been very good, right? Well, let's find out right now in episode 85 of Retro Bits. The Sega Master System, or SMS, launched in North America in 1986. The machine was a redesigned version of Sega's Mark III console that was released in Japan a year prior. The Mark III and SMS were an evolution of Sega's earlier SG-1000, which launched in 1983 alongside the Nintendo Famicom. As the technical successor to these earlier models, the Master System featured a more advanced video chip that was designed in-house and was based on the company's System 2 arcade board. Inside, the Master System is powered by a CPU based on the venerable Zilog Z80, running here at 3.5 MHz. The aforementioned Video Display Processor, or VDP, was an evolution of the popular Texas Instruments TMS-9918 that could be found in many game systems and home computers of the day. The VDP allowed for 31 on-screen colors from a palette of 64. One thing that set the Master System apart from the Famicom and the later NES was that each 8x8 tile could contain up to 16 colors, a big improvement over Nintendo's 4-color limit. Further, the Sega could perform mid-frame palette swaps for even more on-screen colors at a time. Sound came from another popular TI chip, the SN76489, this time integrated into the VDP. It provides 3 programmable square wave channels and 1 noise channel. Of note is that the Japanese version of the Master System also included a 9-channel Yamaha FM sound chip, but this was not present on the North American models. It bears mention that the Sega was overshadowed and outcompeted by Nintendo's marketing and exclusivity agreements, resulting in poor sales here in the US. Everyone I knew in grade school with a home console had an NES. No one had a Sega. By the end of the product's first year on the market, Nintendo had outsold the Master System by almost 10-1. Now, I'm not here to compare the SMS to the NES, as there are plenty of excellent videos out there that have covered this already. Instead, I see this as an opportunity for me to explore the system's catalog for the first time. I did briefly own one of these systems that I picked up for cheap at a Hamfest maybe 4 or 5 years after they came out, but I only had a couple of B titles to play. So today, I'm going to take a look at some hit arcade ports from the 16-bit era that really pushed the system to the limit. All of these are games that I loved in the arcade, and they're all titles that I've never played on the Master System, until now. These aren't necessarily the best games on the platform, just a selection that appealed to me while going through the library. The AV port on the rear of the SMS carries composite as well as analog RGB right out of the box. It has the same pinout as the Genesis and Mega Drive, so I should be able to use my existing RGB SCART cable here. Let's see the NES do that. Right, not comparing the two. Got it. And what better way to start than one of my favorite arcade games, Outrun, the 2 mega cartridge. Yep, it's got twice the mega power. It's 2 megabits or 256K bytes. Something I noticed here on the back, now there are no limits. Is that a slogan Sega actually used? I don't remember any marketing or advertising for the Master System. There really just wasn't any in North America, at least not until the Genesis came out. If you've been here a while, you'll remember that I already looked at the Outrun ports for the 16-bit home computers, and they were found wanting. Outrun really has no business being here on an 8-bit system, the PC Engine excluded, but things are already looking pretty good, so let's see what we've got. Well, to start with, all of the music tracks are here, including the Final Wave ending theme. Now, I did notice that some of the tracks have this weird syncopation that isn't part of the original composition. To me, Outrun music is sacred, and I'm not a fan of that particular change. Well, the game comes out of the gate swinging. The Master System is showing off its color palette here. The graphics look really good, better than any of the 8-bit home systems that I've played this on. Heck, it's even better than some of the 16-bit ports I've played. So we're off to a good start. Handling is a little bit sluggish, but the backgrounds are nice. There's a surprisingly little amount of flicker. There is a version for the 3D shutter glasses on the Master System. I can only imagine how much worse that version is compared to this, though. And my biggest complaint is sometimes the road changes direction without warning. You can't see over the hill. This isn't a problem in the arcade version. Let's see that again. Yeah, I mean, I know the compound turn is coming up, but it feels cheap to hide it behind the hill like that, at least on the first stage. At least they've got a nice crash animation. Unlike the arcade, the occupants aren't thrown from the car, so I guess they're wearing their seatbelts. But there's no B-pillar or roll bar, so tough luck? Yeah, Sega Superscaler games were never going to translate well to the 8-bit systems. They just throw too many sprites on screen at the same time for the pseudo-3D environments for these older machines to handle. But, if you can forgive the fact that some of the environment stuff is just missing entirely, the gameplay is pretty good, actually. So, points for effort, better than the 16-bit systems anyway. So we're off to a good start. Let's see what's next. Next up, we've got Ghouls and Ghosts, a game that's legendary for its difficulty, and a game that I've never been any good at. Well, the music is faithful to the arcade and the graphics are really nice. My baseline for the 8-bits is the Commodore 64, which has a fantastic port of the game. I would say that the character sprites are better in the Master System, but the background artwork is a matter of personal preference. Isn't this wall supposed to be longer? I thought that there was a plant or some other stuff going on up there in the arcade version. Maybe this version of the game has been shortened a bit to fit in a certain amount of ROM space. There we go, that's more like it. Maybe I was just misremembering, but this does feel a bit easier than the arcade for sure. There's a lot less going on, probably due to the number of sprites that can be on screen at the same time. Yeah, for sure. This tree had a lot more vultures in it on the arcade, probably like 4 or 5 or 6, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I played it. At least they've got the large guillotine here. It's nice that they included that. Yeah, it feels like the level was a bit shorter than the arcade, and it's non-contiguous. We had to warp to another part of the stage, so I'm guessing we're just dealing with ROM constraints. Yeah, that's right. You look at me when I'm talking to you. Oh, jeez, that was cheap. Come on. Okay, yeah, so this is different. Instead of just getting an item when you open the chest, you actually are teleported to a store where you can choose what upgrade you want. And another thing that I found out is that that upgrade is persistent. It will stay with you even after you die and even after you continue the game. So that really does make things a lot easier. And speaking of easier, there's no tentacles here coming out of the ground. So in general, probably due to the limitations of the system, the game itself is a lot easier than some of the other ports that I've played. In fact, I haven't died yet, which is pretty unusual. Now there should be a boss standing here, but instead you're warped to a separate screen, again probably due to memory constraints. The Z80 in the system is only set up to address 48 KB of ROM at any one time, but cartridges can be as big as up to 4 megabits. Now, the Master System has a built-in memory mapper, unlike the NES that relied on additional logic in the cartridge itself. So I'm guessing the game must be bank switching here, requiring them to warp the character to a whole new area. And yeah, the cartridge dump is 256 KB, so they're definitely using the memory mapper. Now the first level played really well, it was very responsive, there was no appreciable amount of slowdown, but this second level here has quite a bit of lag. There's flickering sprites, there's a lot of slowdown in the gameplay. I'm guessing they're doing some kind of multiplexing with some of the elements on the screen, that not everything is just a background tile, but I don't know why, because we've only got a maximum of 2 enemies on screen at any given time, which isn't different from the first map. So not sure what's going on here, but it is very, very slow. I will say in general that the lack of difficulty of the Master System port makes this game a lot more fun to play, and I kept coming back to it again and again. I can't really say the same for the arcade, which is generally an exercise in frustration if you're not good at it like I am. What was I saying? I'm sure that was just a fluke, right? Oh, come on. The hole's not even in the same place every time. What the fuck? Careful now. Yeah, no, it's a great port. It's a real boon to the Master System library. Play it yourself. You'll have a great time. I promise you. It's fun. All joking aside, this is a good port. It starts off easy, and the difficulty ramps up the further you get into the game. You should try it yourself. Alright, next up we've got Marble Madness, another one of my favorite arcade games that also can lead to a surprising amount of frustration. Wow, this is amazing for an 8-bit conversion. The graphics look almost identical to the arcade. The sound and music is good too. There's a little bit of difference in the ball sprite, but that's about it really. If I had just one criticism, it's that it's a little difficult to play this game with a D-pad instead of a trackball. The ball accelerates really fast, so sometimes it's hard to control it. Other than that though, this is just about perfect. Okay, little slowdown there, but all the enemies and all the traps are exactly where they should be, so at least it's faithful to the arcade. Two thumbs up. One of my favorite co-op arcades from back in the day is Rampage. There, you could play 3 players simultaneous. Here, on the Sega Master System, the game supports 2-player co-op, so you can play with a friend, if you've got one. As you can see, the graphics are detailed and colorful, once again using the Master System's palette to great effect. The player sprites are nice and large, and there's lots of action on the screen all at once without any appreciable slowdown. My favorite part is eating all the tiny humans. You've got to keep your health bar up, right? All the environmental hazards and character animations from the arcade are here as well. This is another solid port that's been executed on the system, masterfully. Another game I really loved growing up was Double Dragon. I'm not sure what it was. The graphics, the music, putting a guy in a headlock and kneeing him in the face repeatedly, I don't know. As an adult, I realize the game is totally a quarter muncher and I don't enjoy it as much as I used to, but let's take a look anyway, for old time's sake. Yeah, one thing I really loved about this game was the music, and thankfully it's all here and it sounds great, despite the Master System only having 3 square waves available. The NES does have better sound hardware, but we're not comparing the two. In the arcade, spamming the elbow attack works really well in the early levels, but it doesn't seem to be working here, so I'm going to have to try something else. Another thing that's different is the game's signature headlock and shoulder throw move, which is really easy to perform on the arcade, but here on the Master System it seems to only happen occasionally when you're standing over a downed enemy, and there's no way to make it happen reliably. So instead of using the elbow, it looks like the power move here is the jump kick, which seems to have hit detection everywhere your player model touches part of the enemy. That reminds me a lot of the game My Hero, also on the Master System. Now, Double Dragon is a direct successor to Nekketsu Koha Kunio-kun, aka Renegade. The Master System port of Double Dragon came out in 1988, right between Super Dodgeball and River City Ransom, the second and third games in the Kunio-kun lineup. Now, I can't help but draw comparisons to the character style used in this port and the other Technos titles. The sprites in Double Dragon are so much shorter than their arcade counterparts, they feel like they're starting to cross over into the super deformed Kunio-kun universe. Nice. I like how they animated a Bobo breaking through the wall. They could have easily cheaped out and had him walk in from off screen. Both the SMS and the NES could only display 8 sprites per scanline, and they both suffered from flickering in their respective ports of Double Dragon. However, if I recall correctly, the NES port had significant slowdown issues in this particular scene, so I'm giving a point to the SMS right here, even though we're not comparing the two. Okay, I'm going to take a point back from the Master System because there's supposed to be a cat in this scene. Don't worry, I got you guys covered. I'm a little disappointed that the conveyor belt and some of the other environmental hazards that are in the arcade and NES version aren't here, so it could be better. I keep coming back to it, but one thing the Master System really does have over the Nintendo is its color palette. Look how vibrant this scene looks in comparison to the NES port. Not making a comparison, just saying. Next up, we've got another favorite of mine from the 16-bit era, and that is Shinobi. First impressions? Well, the music's good, but the color selection here is a little strange, and the character sprites are awful small compared to their arcade counterparts. Ha! You didn't see that coming, did you? I'm gonna do it again. Yeah, take that. Okay, yeah, so the AI isn't that great. Yeah, the game just doesn't feel as frenetic as it does in the arcade. There are some elements that are missing. It's nice that they included this minigame, but I've always been terrible at it, and this is no exception. Ha! Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I can't really put my finger on it. It is Shinobi, most of the elements are here, but it is missing something from the arcade experience. Get down from there, discount Halloween store Spider-Man. Now this is the part where you're supposed to bust out your ninja magic, but I can't make it work. You're supposed to press and hold one button and then press the other, but I can't figure it out, so I'm gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. Well, that was a little disappointing. Let's see if the Master System can redeem itself with another one of my arcade favorites, Paperboy. Well, we're off to a good start. Seriously impressed by the graphics. The colors just pop, it looks just like the arcade version, plays really well too. If you've played any of the other 8-bit home ports like the Apple II or the C64, then this stands head and shoulders above it. Heck, it looks way better than the NES port too, which we aren't comparing it against. Okay, the NES has way better sound though. The Master System has hardware support for smooth scrolling, both vertically and horizontally. In addition, it also supports smooth scrolling diagonally, which is being used to great effect here. For an 8-bit home system, I am seriously impressed by how good the Paperboy port is. It gives the Amiga version a run for its money. Definitely wish I had this at home when I was growing up. And last but not least, we've got Space Harrier, another ambitious port of another superscalar game from Sega. Right away, we can see we've got a grid pattern on the ground instead of just the usual horizontal lines, so that is nice. Unfortunately, they don't pan as we move from left to right, which is a shame because the Master System has a hardware feature the NES didn't, and that's a scanline counter. This lets the system make changes to the background layer on a per-line basis, so bending and warping effects are easy to implement and have been used to great effect in other games such as Road Rash. It would have been nice to see it here as well. I think it's fair to say that the large sprites in this game aren't sprites at all, but rather background tiles. Because background tiles don't have a transparency color like sprites do, that would explain the fringing effects we see around the edges. Yeah, the Master System has no built-in PCM digital audio support, and you can tell. Now, none of what I said detracts from the fact that this is a pretty good port considering the limitations of the system. It's colorful, the sound is good, the music is good, and it plays well. Now that I think about it, doing the enemies as software sprites using background tiles is probably pretty CPU intensive. That would explain why they didn't do any fancy effects with the grid on the ground plane. That may also explain why there's no city in the background here and all we've got is an empty sky. They may not have had enough room to store the tiles in ROM because it is a limited amount of space and they're using it for the enemies, and also because there's no transparency on the enemies. Every time one scrolled over the city in the background, you'd get that awful fringing effect. It's just much easier to make them look good with a solid color. Of course, nothing I've said today may come as a surprise to you depending on where you grew up. If you're from Europe, the UK, or Brazil, the Master System was much more popular in your market, so you probably know all this stuff already. Right, so what do you think? Did any of these games change your opinion of the Master System? All in all, I've got to say I'm impressed. Despite being an also-ran here in the US, the Sega ports blow away the 8-bit home computer versions that I played growing up. Heck, some of these were actually better than the 16-bit home computer versions too. Well, we can't change the past, but we can still enjoy the system here in the present, and I've got a lot of titles yet to explore. I hope you enjoyed this bit. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time on Retro Bits.